Okay, in this particular video, I want to go over the if function. So I'm on page 52 and 53, and what might actually be helpful is for you to work through this first and just kind of type in the information, even if it's not really totally making sense to you, because the book's going to step you through it. So if you haven't done so already, maybe work through pages 52 through 54, and then you can kind of go back and listen to this. So the first thing we're covering here is the pension. And if you look at page 52, number 3, it talks about this is our salary and benefit costs for our employees. So here's our employees. This shows whether they're full-time or part-time, health plan of family, single or declined, and then also a dental plan, declined or single or family, and then there's salary. So now we're going to use if functions to determine their benefit costs. So if you remember, we've used if functions before, but they've been fairly basic if functions, and an if function allows us to ask the data questions. So far we've had some pretty basic if functions where we can ask it a question if something is over a certain number, put yes or no in there, or let's use an example of sales. If our salespeople make over $10,000 in commission, we're going to give them a bonus, and then we could put in the bonus calculation. So those are some of the basic if functions we've done so far. In this part of the chapter, we're working with if functions that are more complicated. So we're going to use an if function with an and, an or, and what's called a nested if function. So what I'm going to do here is I'm clicking in cell H6, and I'm going to click the FX button here to open. Oops, sorry. I'm going to click in my formula up in here first in the if part of it and hit the FX button. Then I can see, and you could do the same thing to see what you've typed in there. So let's just talk through this. So again, number 3, page 52 says that view right contributes approximately 5.5% of an employee's salary into a retirement account if the employee works full-time and earns more than $45,000 a year. So we're going to use an if function here with an and logical function with it as well. So the first thing you did was you typed in the and part. So typically the first thing we would do as part of an if function is to ask it the question. We would say, well, if C6 is equal to full-time, then do this. But in this case, we need it to meet 2 criteria. We need it to say if C6 is greater or is full-time, and if G6 is greater than 45,000. So we actually have 2 things, criteria basically, that it needs to meet or in order for it to be true, or basically we have 2 different criteria that we're asking questions of. So again, that's why we have the and here. We're typing in the and then we're putting in the C6 equal to full-time, comma, G6 greater than 45,000. So it has to meet both criteria in order for it to be true. So again, the logical test in previous if function, it was something very simple, like is C6 equal to full-time? If it is, then do this. If it's not, then do this. In this case, it has 2 criteria. So that's why we have the and in there. If it's equal to full-time and it's greater than 45,000, why we have and, then we're going to take G6, which is the salary, and multiply it times 5.575%, which gives us this result. If not, it's just going to put a 0 in there. It means that they haven't met the criteria, therefore they're not putting money into their pension. So this is using an if function with a logical test. So to start with this again, you just use the if function as you normally would, but then in this first logical test here, you added that and to say it has to meet both criteria. And then from there, it's the same as what we were used to seeing. It could be a formula like we see here. It could be text like we've seen before. We've seen yes or no, or bonus, no bonus, those types of examples. But that's using the and option with the if function. Okay, in the next one here, in I6, if you click in that one, in this particular one, we just use it in nested if. That just means that there's multiple criteria we're looking at. So on page 53, step number 2, it talks about this. View right offers to pay the annual health premiums for employees not covered by other medical plans. The company pays $2,600 per year per employee for family coverage, $1,500 100 approximately for single, and 0 for declines. So we have 3 different criteria we have to meet here. Usually in if functions, we're saying it's either this or this, but now it's 3 different options. So our first logical test is going to be if D6 is equal to family, then put the 2600 in this cell. But then in our false value, we're going to start another if function. So basically this is called a nested if. So we're starting another if function to add that single and the people who've declined in here as well, so they have no coverage. So in this case, we start if again. If D6 is single, then for the true value, put in 1580, and if not, put 0. So if it doesn't meet family and it doesn't meet single, then it's going to put in the 0 there. So this is a nested if. We could keep going and continue to add more if functions if we had multiple options. In this particular case, we had 3 different, so that's why we have a nested if. Again, with if functions, we usually have 2. So again, we're starting with D6 equals family. The value, if true, if it equals family, it's just going to put 2600 in here. If it's single, it's going to put 5800. If it doesn't meet either of those criteria, it's going to put in a 0. So that's a nested if in the false value that we just add that additional if function. Okay. The last one under dental is showing an example with the OR function. Very similar to the AND, but this one is OR instead. So, and this one shows on page 54, but the explanation is on the bottom, page 53, number 3. So in this case, ViewRight has negotiated a fee for dental benefits. The company pays approximately $1,700 per year for each employee, regardless of the type of coverage. The service providers requires ViewRight to report each person's coverage as family or single for audit purposes. The dental plan is optional, and some employees have declined coverage. So for this one here, our logical test is it's just a regular value. Like before, when we had to use the AND, they had to meet 2 different criteria. In this particular case, it can be family or single, and they both get the $1,700 that's going to be applied for their dental. If they've declined, then the only other option would be 0. So if it says family or dental in E6, then we're gonna put in a value of $1,750. And if it's not either of those, like we're gonna see for the declined, it's gonna put in a 0 for those. So we start with the OR option here because it could be either or, either one of these. Before, with our pension, it had to be and. It had to meet both criteria in order for it to match the criteria. Whereas in this case, it's either or, family or single, and it'll put the value of the $1,750 in there. So that's using the if function with the or using the or with the if function, I should say. The rest of these then you're using the sum function here to sum our total benefits, and then for the salaries and benefits, we're taking the salary plus the total benefits to get your salary plus benefits here, and then you have your totals down below here as well. So this is what your file should look like when you complete through the end of the chapter, page 54. As I also said in Blackboard, we're skipping the formula. So you're doing pages 50 or 45, 46. You could read about the HLOOKUP on page 47. The only difference between the VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP is the HLOOKUP has it in horizontal. So V stands for vertical, H stands for horizontal. That's the only difference there. But then you're skipping the PPMT function and moving on, just skipping right ahead to pages 50 and 51. So hopefully this helps clear this up and it makes sense to you. If not, please let me know if you have any questions.